Let's add some V's to see what's up. I'll even add 5 V's. All right, so looks like this is the error that we're getting. And if we scroll down, we can see what's happening. So in the test can enter when raffle is calculating, we're entering, no problem. We're rolling, no problem. When we call perform upkeep on our VRF coordinator mock, we call request random words, but we're getting this invalid consumer error on our VRF coordinator mock. So let's open up that VRF coordinator v2 mock.sol. Let's look for this invalid consumer here. So it looks like there's a modifier in here called only valid consumer, right? And if we look at this, it says it only allows this to work if a consumer is indeed added. So this is a little bit more information about the Chainlink VRF. When you're working with the subscription model, you got to do a whole bunch of steps, right? And we watched the video where they did all these steps through the UI. And you can see even create and fund a subscription. First, they create a subscription, then they fund the subscription, and then they add the raffle contract as a consumer to that subscription. This way, random people can't use your subscription. So what we need to do actually is we need to up our deploy script here to make sure that we have a valid subscription once we deploy. And when we deploy this contract, we need to add this as a consumer to our subscription. Now, when we're doing this on a real testnet, we could do this all in the UI, but when we're testing, we're going to need to do this all programmatically. So we're going to refactor our deploy raffle so that we can run this test as if it's a real test here. So we can run this test. Now we could just go in here and tweak and automatically add a consumer to our VRF coordinator mock, but let's go ahead, refactor our deploy raffle because we're going to need to do this anyways. So there's a couple things we need to do. So let's start the refactor. So the first thing is this subscription ID. If we don't have this set, or if this is defaults to 0, we're never going to be able to make any calls, right? So we need to have a subscription ID. If we're in the helper config, if we already have a subscription ID from working with the UI, right? If we go to subscription manager and we do have a subscription in here, if we already have one, we would just use that, right? If we don't have one, we would just use that and then we would paste it in here, 234 or whatever. If we don't have one, we're going to need to actually create one. So in here, we can say if subscription ID equals 0, we should assume we don't have one set. So we're going to need to create a subscription. And this is where, and we could put all of these in this deploy raffle script, or we go ahead and we could create our interactions.s.sol that will have a create subscription function for us. So let's go ahead and make our interactions now. So this will be SPDX, license identifier MIT, Pragma, Solidity 0.8.18, contract, create subscription is script. We're going to have to import script from forge std /script.sol like this. All right, cool. And now, and if we pull back up our Foundry Fund Me code, remember, we actually split up the run and the actual funding so that we can just pull this into our script. And for the run, we'll just use that to get the most recently deployed address. And for a subscription, we don't actually even need the raffle address at all. So let's go ahead and let's create a function run, because this is the main thing we're going to need to do. We'll have this return a uint64 because the subscription ID is a uint64. And in here, we're going to just have it return, create subscription. We'll say using config. So we'll create a function called function, create subscription using config, public returns uint64 like this. And then up here, we're going to use our config to create a subscription. Why should we use this, our helper config? We're going to need this VRF coordinator address. In order for us to create the subscription, we're going to need to call this VRF coordinator here. And in fact, if you go to the front end, if you go to vrf.chain.link, let's go ahead and connect, accept, connect MetaMask. Oh, it's going to be mad. We're on an unknown network. We're on Anvil. Let's go to Ethereum. Let's go to Sepolia. If I hit create subscription, we're going to get all this stuff in here. Let's just hit create subscription for now. Our MetaMask is going to pop up. First, we're just going to sign in, and then we're going to get this method here called create subscription on this address. We can even see the hex of what this is calling. So it's calling this function here. And I know we've done a little bit of cast work, but if we're pretty sure we know what this is going to do, we can check it. We can say cast sig, create subscription, and we can see that this is indeed the same as this. So we know we're calling the create subscription function on the front end. We can do that in our script as well. Now here's something interesting. Let's go ahead and copy this and let's reject here. Let's say you don't know what the function call is and you want to figure out what's this front end telling me to do. There's things called Ethereum signature databases where you can paste one of these hex things in here and look for the name of the function that's actually being called. So this is one such example, openchain.xyz. Paste this in and we can see, create subscription. Now these databases only work if somebody else has already added them to the database, and Foundry has a way to actually push them up. Again, I know I'm not really explaining these function signature things right now, but I will in later sessions. So in any case, we're going to be calling this create subscription function exactly the same as the front end's doing. The VRF contract to call, but we need the VRF coordinator address to call it on. So we're going to do helper config equals new helper config like this. And we're going to have to import helper config, of course. Import helper config from helper config.s.sol. And then we're going to get the active network information, kind of exactly the same as here. I'm just going to copy from the deploy raffle, bring it over to interactions. I'm going to paste it in, but we don't need most of this. We only need the VRF coordinator. So I'm actually going to delete everything except for the VRF coordinator so that it kind of auto formats like this. And now, because I like modularity, I'm going to create another function called create subscription. Function create subscription, which just takes the address VRF coordinator, public returns uint64 like this. And we're just going to have this function return create subscription now that we have the VRF coordinator address. So create subscription using config just gets the config. Create subscription just creates a subscription based off whatever VRF coordinator we pass it. So now in here, this is where we're actually going to create the subscription. I want this to do some console logging. I would like it to print out to me what it's doing. So we'll do console.log, creating subscription on chain ID, block.chain ID, like this. Now we're going to start our broadcast, which is actually going to call the create subscription function. So start broadcast like this, and then we'll do vm.stop broadcast like this. So we're going to call the create subscription function on the VRF coordinator mock, which we're going to have to import, and we see the VRF. In the VRF coordinator mock, there's a create subscription function. This is exactly what we're going to be calling, so that we actually have a subscription first of all. And then later on, we're going to figure out how to add a consumer. We're going to do that soon, but first we got to start with create subscription. So we're going to import VRF coordinator v2 mock from, we could also just import the interface if we wanted at chainlink/contracts/src/ this whole thing, this whole song and dance here. But now we can do VRF coordinator mock, VRF coordinator dot create subscription. Call the create subscription function. And if we open up the VRF coordinator v2 mock again, we can see that this indeed does return a subscription ID. So cool. So that we'll say uint64 sub ID equals that. And then we can just say return sub ID. And we'll do a little console.logging. We'll say your sub ID is sub ID. And then we'll even say console.log, please update subscription ID in helper config.s.sol. Great. So now we have a way to actually create a subscription programmatically. And this is something that we'd probably also want to write some tests for, right? In test, in unit, we'd do like interactions, test.t.sol. but I'm going to skip this for now. But I'm going to skip this in this section because we're going to do some of that in the integration as well. All right, so we have a way to actually create a subscription now. So now that we've done this, I'm going to remove everything. We'll go back to our deploy. The whole reason we were doing this is so that if we don't have a subscription, we're going to make a subscription. So that contract that we just created, we're going to import it, import create subscription from interactions.s.sol. And in here, we're going to say create subscription, create subscription equals new create subscription. Thanks, GitHub Copilot. And we're going to create a subscription. So we're going to say subscription ID equals create subscription dot, and this is why we have this create subscription function that just gets passed a VRF coordinator, because in our deploy raffle, we already have the VRF coordinator. We don't need to get the config again. We can just do create subscription dot create subscription, pass the VRF coordinator address like this to get the subscription ID. And we're going to override this one. And okay, cool.